Hello, I'm Rob Clyde. I'm the chair of the board of directors for ISACA, and also on the board for Titus. And I have the privilege here today to be with Rudy, and we're going to be talking about AI and what we can learn from the human brain. I love AI because I got involved with it when I was young, Rudy, and I don't know about you, but I've been doing AI for a while. And I can remember clear back when I was in computer science, we actually, even back then, were comparing AI to the human brain.
Right.
And as I look at you, I think you might be able to help add some things. Maybe you can give a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Rudolph, Araujo, go by Rudy. Pleasure to be here, in a conversation with you, Rob. And so I'm at a company called Awake Security. We're about a 3.5, 4-year-old company that is, doing a bunch of interesting stuff around AI, specifically focused on network traffic analysis, and helping customers, make sense of network data, identify devices on it, etc. You raise a really great point, right? I mean, AI, if you split the word, there's intelligence in it, right? And what's the most intelligent thing we know? It's the human brain. The thing that I think we've always found amazing at Awake is, you go out to a conference show like this, or you're driving on the street, and you see, billions of things, right? There's signs, there's people trying to cross the street, there's traffic signs, there's signs telling you, hey, here's the way to get to the West Stage keynote. And, you process all of that, and it's amazing how much data you're processing in real time. But then, out of the corner of your eye, maybe you spot there's some smoke, or there's something that focuses your attention there, right? Or maybe a pedestrian jumps onto the street as you're driving. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we could get a lot of benefit from if we could implement that in technology, right? Because now think about the analogy to the security world, right? What's the biggest challenge security analysts have? Too much data. And you got to make sense of it. Humans are not built to deal with volumes of data, so I think AI has got a lot of practical implications there.
Yeah, there seems like it could be a lot to add to that. Well, interesting enough, back in the day when I was studying computer science, we even then talked about comparing AI to the human brain.
Right.
Not surprisingly, that's how the coin artificial intelligence came about. And I can remember that when I was a student, I was challenged to write a program that would be able to be an AI that would play the ancient Chinese game of Go.
Yeah.
And the reason I was challenged to write this program is because the game of Go has more possibilities in it than there are atoms in the universe. And so as my professor told me, and as I learned later, everybody in AI had decided this was the Holy Grail. If you could have an artificial intelligence that could actually beat a human grandmaster at the ancient Chinese game of Go, there's no way it could do it by algorithms and compute. It had to actually be a little bit like a human being. So I remember trying, and I wrote my program, and other people in the class did as well, and I'm sorry to say that the best my program could do was to beat a total novice who had never played the game before. The first time my program could beat them sometimes, and the second time it always lost. And that was the best that I could accomplish. And I realized, boy, we are so far from the Holy Grail of AI, and this is decades ago. And then I followed it over the years, and AI kind of went through a real trough of disillusionment where, if you had a project called AI, it would get canceled. And then it came back, and it came roaring back over the last decade. So much so that in 2016, I was thrilled and amazed to hear that Google's AlphaGo, built on DeepMind, actually beat a grandmaster.
That's right.
And now they have a program that beats all the grandmasters and all the other programs. So they have an incredible AI that has already reached the Holy Grail that the founders of AI set way back then. So, are we, with all this progress over the last decade, are we still in a situation of great hype, and how do we cut through that if there is a lot of hype?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's been a ton of innovation that has happened over the last couple of decades, right? I think simply, Moore's law has helped with that, right? I mean, the amount of compute we have available, the amount of storage we have available, enables a lot of that. I think that the challenge, though, is, if you walk through the halls, you see AI on every other booth, right?
Every company claims to have it.
Exactly. And I think that, when I talk to customers, one of the things they'll always ask me is, hey, why is your AI better than their AI? And to me, that's almost the wrong question to ask, right? Because the real focus should be, what problem is the customer you trying to solve?
Right.
Right. Because there's simpler solutions than AI. Let's go with those solutions.
If you can use a mathematical algorithm, why wouldn't you just use
Exactly.
that?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think, in security, it's become kind of out of fashion to say, hey, we apply rules.
Yeah.
Well, we follow and apply rules in everything else we do, right? Rules are not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, they're not infinitely scalable, and that's where other technologies come in. So to kind of answer your question, I think some of the things that customers can do is understand what is the operational impact of this AI going to be, right? Because one of the things that the vendors will maybe not tell you, but will be surprised, is, oh yeah, by the way, you've got to wait 30 days for us to train the AI. It's like, oh, wait a second, so that means I'm not going to get value. Okay, fine, I'll make that investment, I'll wait 30 days. Guess what, on day 31, something in your organization changes for very legitimate purposes, right? Someone's traveling, someone's visiting from out of town. Oh, yeah, you didn't tell us that. Sorry, we got to train again. So I think understanding these operational impacts of training, understanding what happens to your data. Is your data being uploaded to a vendor's cloud? Are you comfortable with that? Understanding what does that mean for your security analysts. One of the things we see a lot with security solutions is AI does not have human intuition yet.
No.
Right. So while we can beat Go, we still don't have the singularity.
It can play Go, but it can't solve an arbitrary problem.
Right.
Yes.
Or to pick a very romantic example, it can't fall in love, so to speak.
Right.
And I think what's happening because of that is the types of alerts, the types of data that AI or a lot of the AI-based solutions surface tend to be noise, right? False positives. And the one thing security teams don't have more of is time.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding how is this AI going to impact your security team on an ongoing operational basis is clearly important as well.
So let's talk about this false positive issue a little more.
Sure.
So you kind of started out with the analogy with the human brain and artificial intelligence.
That's right.
The last thing security people want is yet more alerts, as you said, and more false positives that they have to work their way through. How can better understanding this analogy with the human brain translate into something you can build into a given AI to do a better job at dealing with false positives?
One of the things that we've done at Awake is, we take all of these things that the AI surfaces as what we call weak signals, right?
Okay.
So let's jump back into the analogy for a second. You're driving down the street, you see a kid making, his or her way towards just getting onto the sidewalk, maybe getting towards the street, right? You're fine. You see your light's green. They're not going to jump off the street. As you get closer, you see they're still walking. So each of these things adds a little bit more data in your brain that, okay, I got to keep an eye out for that kid. Right. And then when you're right at that intersection and they jump in, you instantly kick into a reaction mode, right? You hit the brakes or you cut across the other side or what have you. And if you think about the amount of things that are going on in your head at that particular point in time, well, you can apply something very, very similar to security, right? Because individual things may not by themselves be smoking guns, right? So for instance, if I tell you, hey, Rob, your device is connecting out to Google Drive once an hour, every hour, and it's uploading data. You might say, hey, I've got a backup software that uses Google Drive and it uploads data. It's like, but wait a second, about 3 hours after that behavior started, we saw that your device connected to all of the other devices in the network and started enumerating the shares on the network.
I see.
Okay, now suddenly it's starting to say, okay, we're starting to see a pattern of behavior that fits. So if you take all of these weak signals and you club them in and you build these full-blown incidents that kind of span the entire kill chain, I think what you can do is you can avoid the individual noise, right? So you don't give someone 4,000 alerts. You give them one incident that correlates all of this across the devices, across the protocols, across time. So I think that's a really good approach where AI is very helpful because it can process a lot more data, but at the same time you're not falling into the trap of alert noise, alert fatigue, alert cannon, if you will.
Right. So then it seems like one of the other challenges might be around how do you train this?
Yeah.
Is this going to take a lot of time? for somebody to implement an AI in their environment to actually avoid false positives and have the right training? Because I assume it has to be trained in some fashion.
So that's a great question, right? And it kind of goes back to that operational impact we were talking about earlier. You know, one of the approaches that most AI vendors take is they do something called temporal baselining, right?
Right.
Which is this idea that you study someone for 30 days or you study an organization for 30 days. And then on day 31, you go into a more active state where you say, hey, is someone doing something that they haven't done in the last 30 days, right? The problem is the organizations we work with, the businesses we work with today, they're changing all the time for very legitimate purposes, right? I'll give you a real world example. One of our customers is a big educational institution, right? And they had a competitive solution deployed. They came into work one day and it tells them, hey, your entire faculty network is exfiltrating data, right? Multiple devices uploading large amounts of data out to the internet. So all hell breaks loose, right? Panic, because this looks like a massive attack, et cetera, et cetera. Well, to make a long story short, turned out IT rolled out new backup software. So technically the AI was absolutely correct.
Right.
Large number of devices uploading data to a previously unknown location, except it was completely legitimate.
Right.
So what's a better approach to that, right? So rather than looking at just what you've done in the past 30 days, you can look at what is everyone else around you doing. And specifically, what are the people or the entities, the devices most like you doing? Because in this case, for instance, with the other faculty members, they've all had the same behavior. So unless your entire network is compromised in one fell swoop, which almost never happens, there's a big likelihood that was a false positive.
Okay. So if I hear you right, using the analogy of the human brain, if I have too narrow of a focus and kind of blinders on, so I'm only seeing like this.
That's right.
Versus having the peripheral vision, I'm going to end up with these types of false positives.
Exactly.
Because a human being does see the whole situation.
Exactly.
In a much broader field.
Humans don't learn over a 30-day period, right? We're the product of our lifelong experiences.
Right.
And yes, the longer we learn, the more educated we are, the more,
So it's see more seems to be part of the answer. And then you've talked a lot about this 30-day period.
Yeah.
So are you implying that there's continuous learning that's going on?
Exactly.
And how do you make that happen? Because it's live now, it's running, it's in production.
Right.
How can it still continue to learn, and how do you make sure it doesn't make mistakes? Because we humans do make a lot of mistakes.
No, absolutely, right? So I think, this is a statistical science at the end of the day, right? So it's not a exact, this is always right or this is always wrong.
So it will sometimes get it wrong.
It absolutely will get it wrong, but I think the advantage that this approach of aggregating these weak signals has is when we do get it wrong, we don't surface it up to the top, right? We keep an eye out on it. Very similar to, again, that analogy we were giving earlier. You pay attention to things, maybe not with 100% of your attention, but you know that there might be problem or trouble lurking there. Nothing happens, great. You just drive past that intersection.
Right.
But if that kid happens to jump, you're already ready for it. So I think aggregating these weak signals is an approach that we feel like is going to help with that problem precisely.
Okay. So you're aggregating the weak signals. This technique is to aggregate the weak signals, keep it kind of at the surface level, and then if something else happens,
that's right.
Then you're going to suddenly put it in so that it takes somebody's attention.
That's exactly right. So then the analyst has this, basically this entire report of an incident that says, okay, these are the 7 things that happened. These are the 10 devices that were involved in it. And by the way, this is the amount of data that left your environment.
Yeah. So I remember, again, I studied computer science decades ago, and I have caught up. I keep up with the more modern techniques. But I can remember way back then, one of the things we were actually trying to do is to build systems that actually mimicked the way a human brain worked. And they were huge failures.
Yeah.
What are you doing so that, because that's a huge job, actually. If you think about it, if part of trying to apply AI to information security is first mimic human behavior 100%, you're probably not going to be successful,
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. But you must be like taking some pieces and not repeating the mistakes of the early days of AI trying to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth stating up front, right? The one thing is, we don't believe at Awake that the goal of our AI, the goal of our product is to replace the human.
Okay.
Right? Because the reality of it is, human intuition is just, magnificent, right? There's things
Yep.
that you can do with just intuition that an AI is never going to catch up on. So the things that we focus on is how do we use AI to make those same humans more productive, right?
Okay, so the human being is still going to be involved.
Absolutely.
With the use of an AI.
Right.
Particularly in this area related to information security and the amount of
Yeah.
stuff happening as to whether or not an alert should occur. But won't their role change substantially? And are the same, while a human's still going to be involved, are the same people still going to be able to do that, which seems like a higher level job than what they might have been doing before?
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting research about airplane pilots, right? And I'll go on a little bit of a tangent here, and then we'll come back.
I think that's good.
What they found is airplane pilots, are not, the difference between the best pilots and the pilots that are not so good is that they know exactly where to find the information. But given the same information, all of the pilots make the same decisions. Right, so the trick is, how do you surface the right information to that junior level 1 analyst that the level 3 analyst just knows where to find?
Okay.
But he spends 45 minutes trying to find that information.
Right.
So that's really the problem we're trying to focus on, right? Like, let's not make the bar for a level 1 analyst so high that he needs to go dig and uncover stones and push stuff out of the way to go get that information. Instead, that information surfaced to him, and then it turns out he can make the same decision that your level 3 analyst. So our approach is really, how do we elevate the skills of everyone in the team so that some of the mundane data collection, data aggregation work is done by the technology, but the ultimate decision making, the ultimate intuition, if you will, still comes from that human, right? The other thing is, there's always tribal knowledge in any organization, right? So for instance, I might know that you work out of your home office in Iowa, or that you're in accounting. That's the kind of knowledge that may never show up on the network, right? Being able to kind of take that and put that into the AI model is another aspect of where I think the humans play a big role, right? So yeah, we're definitely not looking to replace any humans. The singularity is not around the corner.
So who takes that knowledge once you're using the AI? Is that a vendor like Awake, or is that actually more likely the people actually implementing the tool that's going to be doing that?
It's a combination of both.
Okay.
So we operate very much as a product as a service. So we believe we're in it with you. But at the end of the day, you're the customer that is living and breathing your security every day, right?
Yeah.
So being able to understand that, hey, like for instance, we have a retail customer that has a bunch of PCI data they need to protect, right? So what they're doing is, anytime someone from a expected network, let's say someone from their development team, accesses that PCI network, they want to know. So ultimately, that is a policy that they've defined and have implemented through our technology.
Yep. So one of the things at ISACA that we always worry about as well, we are an association of cybersecurity and risk professionals.
Right.
So I'm going to put my risk hat on for just a second. AI can have risk as well.
That's right.
One of the risks that come to my mind is that how do I know that it has not been deliberately and maliciously trained, or that has not been poorly trained by a human being who really didn't know what they were doing? So now it does some things a human being would do, but maybe that human being didn't actually do it very well. How do you deal with that kind of a situation with an AI?
Yeah, so I'll kind of split those into two,
Okay,
right?
great.
So on the adversarial AI, we're certainly starting to see more and more threat actors using AI, right? So I'll give you a very simple example. A lot of security vendors will use things like VirusTotal or these portals where you've got samples of malware, right?
Yep.
So what are attackers doing? They're starting to poison those now, as ways of basically poisoning the training set for an entire industry of vendors. The reality of it is, I think, from our perspective, we don't use any of those external sources to train it. We train based on your own network, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a very real example. So one of our customers had a Polycom device. Well, they had 70,000 Polycom devices in their environment. Turns out 4 of those devices were uploading data every once in a while to AWS. As it turns out, there was an IT contractor that had basically tapped into 4 phones, was recording the conversations.
Oh my gosh.
And uploading this data. Now, the reason I bring that up is that behavior was happening way before we got there.
Right.
So the advantage of training on an actual organization is you can say, okay, you know what, I see 17,000 polycoms. Why are these 4 polycoms making this random connection, whereas the other 16,996 aren't?
Right.
So that's a great example
Very
of something
quickly
that,
doing which
exactly.
of these, kind of back to Sesame Street, which of these 4 is not like the other.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to have to use that analogy now. But that's a good example. On the other side, in terms of bad training or someone that is inexperienced, that's where we really work on that product as a service model, right? We believe that we really need to empower the customers to do what they need, but we need to make sure that we're stopping them from hurting themselves as well, right? Where they put in the wrong data. So we're very involved during the whole customer rollout process, and then even beyond with a lot of our customers, where we're monitoring the threats that they face, things like that, and make sure that the models are never corrupted, if you will.
So even if I made a mistake or it did get corrupted, how do we untrain? You think about the human brain. How do you, that's not always easy to untrain something that has been trained to. Is it easier with an AI or is it harder?
It's actually, we essentially have a feedback loop, right?
Okay.
So we every time we look at an analyst, we present something to the analyst, we're tracking, is this something that they act on? Is this something that they seem to be spending a lot of time on and is therefore interesting? Or is this something that they look at and they say, okay, this is not so interesting? So that gives us that feedback loop to say, okay, next time we want to maybe not elevate the risk on this particular type of incident as much as the others.
Great. So you mentioned before that one of the challenges we face is that there are people out there that are now beginning to use AI maliciously. They're threat actors,
right?
And they are using AI themselves, whether it's AI bots or more sophisticated malware or better phishing attacks or whatever it might be. Can AI actually be part of the solution to be able to combat those types of AI-based threats? And what might the differences be between a human being trying to do that and AI?
I think the challenge that AI really helps with is scale, right? I mean, if you're trying to assess, gigabytes or terabytes of data, there's no way a human being can kind of operate at that scale, right? Especially in any kind of real time. I think specifically, what we do in our platform is we look for kind of the signs that something is being influenced in a malicious perspective, right? So for instance, we call it malicious intent. Think about an insider, right? They might be accessing a device that they always have access to, that they're completely well within their rights to access. But they're doing it in a way that is slightly different. Maybe they're doing it at a different time of the day, or they're downloading data today instead of uploading data. So those are the kinds of things that we look for in terms of an attacker and the kind of behaviors that an attacker might show. And we use that information again in that weak signal kind of approach. So that by itself may not be enough, but if you look at everything else that particular individual or that particular threat actor is doing, we can then club it all together and say, okay, in aggregate now, this seems like an attack, or you know what, maybe we were wrong about that first incident, or that first event.
So let's look ahead at the future then, kind of moving forward in time and taking these techniques. Let's
crystal ball out.
Yeah, crystal ball out, both on the good and the bad side, but let's start with the good side. So as we crystal ball out and we look at this at the future, what begins to happen, or do we find that we need less and less human interaction as we go forward into the future with this, or just does the nature of human interaction continue to change as more and more is automated through AI?
Yeah, I think the latter, right? I mean, like one of the things your organization is really good at is kind of getting more and more people into this industry, right? But it's clear we don't have enough people. So I don't think the goal of AI in general, at least as far as Awake sees it, is to replace those humans, because I think what we're trying to do is make those humans more productive. Okay. How do we get the same 3 people that you have do more with their current, with the technology they have, right? I mean, one of the,
So we're probably not looking at a future of the bad AI systems and the good AI systems just duking it out with no people involved.
I don't know, maybe I'm not as much of a sci-fi buff as others, but yeah, I don't think we're that close to that.
Okay. Well, great. Well, Rudy, this has been a fabulous discussion. Any final thoughts that you think people really need to know about AI and this analogy with the human brain?
I think my advice to customers is always, ask the key questions of your vendors, right? How is this going to affect me, not just today, don't fall just for the pretty UI. How is this going to work for me operationally day 2, day 3, day 4, day 300, right? I think the other thing to keep in mind is, again, anyone that tells you their AI is going to come and replace your humans is probably lying to you today, right? So that's another marketing message that I strongly suggest don't fall for. And I think the final thing is, again, start with what problem are you trying to solve, right? Because there are some problems that you could solve with maybe the existing technology stack you already have, and you don't need any of this, buzzword bingo, if you will, hitting you. So those are a few of the things that we worked with our customers to really kind of help understand like what drives them and what makes them successful.
Yeah. So kind of wrapping up with what I'm hearing, Rudy, and what I've learned is, unlike when I was a young computer science student and we hit that hype cycle decades ago relative to AI, which was a real hype cycle. It was all pretty much hype. We didn't have a lot of real world solutions. Today, we actually are now getting real world solutions, so it isn't just hype. But on the other hand, there is still a lot of hype.
Yep.
And we should be careful, but don't let the fact that there's still hype keep us from finding ways to actually embrace artificial intelligence and use it for information security.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly well said.
Great. Well, thanks, Rudy. It's a pleasure, and I'm so glad we had a chance to chat on one of my favorite subjects.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you.